You're a communist at heart. You should love that kind of market capitalism, equal opportunity to go bust.
Okay, well, thank you for the statement. Thomas Selacek has bright red hair and he's tall, you can hardly miss him. He loves to talk about economics, fairy tale for adults, how he calls it. He loves to be provocative. And his book, The Economics of Good and Evil, which you can also buy outside, became a bestseller and was awarded the Frankfurt Book Fair's Deutsche Wirtschaftsbuch Prize. When he was younger, at the age of 24, he was advisor to the then president Václav Havel. Professionally, he's a chief macroeconomist at one of the biggest Czech banks. And when in Prague, there's quite a high probability of meeting him riding on a bicycle, going to some pub debate with some night owls of this Bohemian capital. Thomas, your statement, please.
Thank you very much for having me. Of course, one possibility is that if presented with the situation today, this would seem like a fulfilled utopia in the history of mankind. One of the probabilities, or we must not dismiss the probability that, let's say, 90% of the, let's say, situation of today is, in fact, an utopia fulfilled in much more fantastic ways than all the utopias that we have read. I'm not saying from 100%, but from majority of the observation. The problem with utopias, philosophically speaking, is the most fundamental problem when we compare ideal with the real. Ideas should be compared, ideal against the ideal. That was sort of why I think communism as a strange ideology could win over capitalism in my country for 50 years, is because ideal communism looked better than real capitalism, but this happens all the time. Ideal capitalism will always look better than real communism, etc., etc. So if one needs to be, if one wants to be proper, we should compare ideal with the ideal, disregard the real, or the real with the real, which is impossible if we're talking about ideal utopia. So there we must be aware that we always make this intellectual mistake where we compare ideal utopias, they need to be ideal because they're not yet real, with the real situation. And these utopias, when they actually materialize, turn out completely different. I always like this sort of thought experiment. Let's imagine, there's a world symposium of physicists and, let's imagine God comes down and says, okay guys, you can change one rule. Which rule would it be? What number that sort of governs the universe would you choose? And let's imagine these physicists would be very ecologically inclined, so they would decrease the friction number so that we could actually run more ecological cars, etc. On that day, when they would actually change the number, the whole universe could disassemble itself because it would simply fall apart. Now, today, we would probably be wise enough to decline, as our physicists, such an offer, saying that we perhaps understand a little bit of the reality, but not well enough to change it fundamentally in its basic structure. Now, just imagine this situation happening 100 years ago. That would be a fatally dangerous situation. Let's imagine in the modern times where people were sort of trigger happy to change things that work. Now, we in social sciences, or in the fairy tale of social sciences, are asked these questions immediately every day. What sort of physical or interpersonal law would you change? Now, let's talk a little bit about folly. I really enjoyed what John Gray said, the difference between an error and a folly, which seems to be a sort of common subject in this debate. Folly is, if I translate this in, let's say, a psychoanalytical way, which is what I try to do when I look at the economy, is that you fetishize the id machine to the point that a subject-object reversal happens, which is exactly, I would argue, that happened with the economy. Today, the id machine, something that's supposed to fulfill your dreams, lead you to utopia, is economy. The utopia of today is growth. We are living an utopia, which is this constant religious hope, prayer for constant growth. When you fetishize something, in other words, when you become dependent on a facility, which today I would argue is economic, what you witness is a subject-object reversal. In other words, you think you're in control of it, it becomes in control of you. And now let's go immediately into the topic of economics and into utopia, which is who will lead us into the future. In economics, we are very future happy, generally, when it comes to predictions of 1 or 2 years ahead of time, and these are usually stupid predictions of some number of growth or inflation, etc. But beyond that, our economic fantasy ends. It is not up to economists to imagine, let's say, the ending of the system, which is what John Stuart Mill considered to be the role of an economy is. What will the system leave us at when we have grown? This is something that we gave up because we have sort of fetishized the economy. Now, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the economy. The problem is when you fetishize it. So, if you don't normatively tell where you want to end with the economy or any system, if it is resistant towards the normative, it will become normative but backwards. In other words, the economy it is an unorchestrated orchestrator. You're not allowed to orchestrate it. This is the mantra of the hardcore economics. Let it be, don't touch it, don't moderate it, and if you moderate it, by no means moderate it in an ethical sort of a way. But it will moderate you. In other words, it will be normative towards you. You mustn't be normative towards it. It will be normative backwards. And this is, I think, the fundamental trick of economics that has become religion. It tells us what we are, it tells us what to do, and it tells us where to go. There is this fetish component, something extra-rational, even hovering over the market. John and Kelsey and Joanna are not the smart component, the divine component of the markets. The divine component of the markets is hovering above the market, so to speak. When it comes to systems, I don't believe in systems per se. If you take an ideal image of a system, that would be a computer program. It's pure rationality, logical, mathematical algorithms, no Oedipus complex, no mass behavior, no sort of hatred.
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah, but it could be. I mean, if you idealize a system, you will think of a computer program, which is completely rational.
No, it doesn't have to be a complex system. If you have a complex system, which is corporation style, much more complex system where you have a lot more richness to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But my point is that even these systems freeze. Even a computer system freezes, which has nothing to do with psychology. That's my point. And this system needs to be reset. And adding to the debate that was here, I don't think we as human beings will ever be able to come up with a system that doesn't freeze, or a system that doesn't produce negative side effects. What we should think about is how to perform a sort of reset of the system in a systematic way, which is one way how to read the crises is that this systemic reset was enforced from within the system. We live in fantasies of either high tech, low life, or low tech, high life. So elves, for example, would be a nice example of low tech, high life. Or if you think of this strange movie Avatar, there basically you see a fight between high tech, low life, which would be the human civilization, and low tech, high life, the aboriginal green creatures. What we are trying to achieve with economics, it seems to me, is exactly to produce high tech, high life situation. Now, these thoughts that I have heard today is something that reminds me of theology as well. I mean, there in Whitehead's reception or reading of Order and Chaos, he presents God as the chaos maker, and devil, contrary to classical theology, devil, the evil sort of tendency, as the status quo. And so I thought this was something that ties very well nicely with the Uroboros reading of the economy when we go to Schumpeter or people like that who are actually keen at the destructive element. Let me close the utopia with John Maynard Keynes, his classical, let's say, essay or speech, which is economic possibilities of our grandchildren, in which he argues that economics will 20 years from now, 100 years from when the speech was first written, become not a religious discipline which tells us what to do and how to be, because the normative part in economics is in the word is. Saying that human being is rational is, in a way, sounds like a positive statement, but it's a normative statement because it basically asserts a myth to be true, and the method of doing that is an assumption. So what we need to do is to de-fetishize economics. In other words, the proper question should never be does the market work, but the question should be, does the market work the way we want them to work? Because if I ask, does this pen work, we all immediately know to tell us the function of the pen, and that is to write. It is not to fry, chips. But if it is something that is unclear, and the economy is unclear as to the tellers or the purpose of it, then the question is impossible, even the question is impossible to ask, is the economy efficient, or is the economy functional, if we don't know what efficient and functional is, or could be. So in the line of John Maynard Keynes, economy, I think, in the future will become a negligible aspect. It will be a maintenance science, so to speak. It will no longer be an architect that builds the house, but it will be maintenance personnel that sort of fixes the tubes. And in a way, I think we will move from supply creation to demand creation. You can see this already in the economy today, that the more important part is demand for demand rather than demand for supply. And let me just conclude with a demonstration of sort of three titans, the way our thinking of the economy changed tremendously in just one generation. And that would be IBM, Microsoft, and Google. IBM produces things, and you can see this in the history of mankind from the cradle of civilization, is we moved from things that you could knock on to things, structures of management or manufacture or whatever, a computer program. And the third stage would be non-things, and that is, I think, where we are moving towards, in a Nietzschean sort of a way, we are moving collectively to the age of a child that sort of dances and only cares about entertainment. And this entertainment industry, playful industry, is what I think is ahead of us. So IBM produces things that you can knock on. Microsoft, you can't really knock on the program, but you can at least box it and buy it in the box and buy it. Whereas from Google, you can't knock on it. It's sort of, doesn't matter if it moves to China. You can't buy Google, and you can't put it in a box. This happened in just one generation, this complete abstractization of demand and supply. If you extrapolate this tendency into the future, you might get a nice image of where the economic utopia is headed.
Thank you, Thomas. One question to you before we open it up.